Scrutiny Commission. So my name is Councillor Leanne Werner, and I'm the chair of the Environment Scrutiny Commission. Before we start the meeting, I have a few announcements to make. So this meeting will be recorded by the council and uploaded to Southwark Council's YouTube channel tomorrow. Please note all guests will have their microphones muted when they join the meeting. You'll be asked to remain on mute unless invited to speak. Please wait until I've given you permission to speak before unmuting your microphone. To ensure that this virtual meeting runs smoothly, only one individual should speak at a time. Any person speaking must be permitted to finish what they're saying without interruption. If I request that an individual stop speaking, they should do so immediately. If a member of the Commission wishes to speak, could I ask them to indicate this via the chat function? Please note all guests will be made attendees after they've entered the meeting. A message should now have shown on your screen to indicate this has been done. Bearing in mind that a recording of this meeting will be posted on the Council's YouTube channel. If you're planning to speak at the meeting, you can choose to switch off your camera so that only your voice will be heard. Members of the public who are disconnected from the meeting due to technical difficulties should use the link or dial-in instructions they were sent initially to return to the meeting. If a member of the Commission or officer loses internet connection or power, can they please inform Fitzroy or Julie or via email or Microsoft Teams immediately, and we can let them back in. Members of the public are welcome to record, screenshot or tweet the public proceedings of the meeting. A copy of the Council's protocol for reporting and filming is available on the Southwark website. And finally, in the interest of health and safety, we'll be taking a 5 to 10 minute comfort break at the end of each hour or thereabouts. Great, so if we kick off with the meeting, do I have any apologies of absence? No, okay, fine. So I'd like to confirm the voting members. So can I ask voting members to please introduce yourself when I call your name? Councillor Graham Neal.
Oh, sorry, Graham rang me about 20 minutes ago just confirming the start time. So I don't know if he's got a technical problem or something. Okay. Do you want me to try and get hold of him?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Councillor Rada Burgess, could you confirm you're here?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Great. Welcome. Councillor Tom Flynn.
Yes, I'm here. I can also see Councillor Graham Neal as well, so you might want to call him back.
Oh, so he's around. Good to hear. Councillor Richard Leeming. Councillor Richard Leeming, are you around? Are you here?
I'm around and I'm no longer muted.
Oh, good. Councillor Damien O'Brien, we've just heard from you. Councillor Michael Situ.
I'm here.
Great. And Jeremy Leach.
Hi, Jeremy Leach, co-opted member.
Thank you very much. So we don't have any notifications of urgent business. Do I have any disclosure of interest or dispensations for the meeting?
Leanne, can I just come in? It's Graham Neal.
Yeah, sure. Are you here?
Yeah,
present?
Vice Chair. I think I was here some time ago. I've been here a while. So Vice Chair and Councillor for St George's Ward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Graham. Appreciate it. Right. So if we move on. So yeah. Going back, do we have any disclosure of interest or dispensations? No, I'll take that as a no. And can we agree the minutes from the meeting on the 10th of March?
Agreed.
Agreed. Yeah, I can see lots of thumbs up, so I'll take that as agreed. So we've got quite a busy agenda tonight. I'll just run through what we're going to talk about and discuss. So we're going to start off with talking about highways, pathways and a car parking update and the impact of COVID-19. That will be followed by a carbon offset update. After that, we'll be discussing cell chip. Then we'll show, then we'll have an air quality update, followed by a short video that we filmed during lockdown to show the environmental impact of COVID-19. And then finally, we'll be reviewing the climate emergency roadmap report at the end. So if we start off with the first item, so Transport Policy Officers have provided the attached briefing on the impact of COVID-19 on transport plans. In response to a Commission request for a briefing on the percentage of car parking spaces, officers have provided the attached table on CPZ permits. These are all in your pack and you should have seen them. We've got Pip Howson here tonight and Simon Bevan. So Pip Howson is the team leader for transport policy and Simon Bevan is the director of planning and highways. I wonder if I could invite you both to speak now about the reports that you've submitted. Thanks.
Can I just correct that Simon Bevan is Director of Planning, that actually Mick Lucas, who is unfortunately on leave, is the Director of Environment, which includes highways. So just
thanks for that clarification.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great. So I'll hand over the floor to you.
Okay, what I thought would probably be most useful in our time is that members of as they've had the briefing and they are clearly aware of how we're trying to work at the moment, I wondered if you just wanted to ask me some questions rather than me just repeat what I put in the report.
I mean, could you give us a summary?
Yes, of course.
Just 5 minutes summary, just top line, and then we can go into questions from members, just to set the the content.
Right, that's fine. So since we last met, we went into lockdown quite quickly after the last meeting of this commission. So we've been working out what we were going to do on COVID, and then on the 1st of May, TfL requested that we put all of our funded programme on hold. They then negotiated with DfT for some emergency funding. We then submitted an application for some of that funding, and we are still awaiting the outcome of that. Just to add to that, we have also applied for some funding directly to DfT, which we were indicated that we were able to do. It's not a huge amount of money, but at this moment everything helps. We have also, there are 2 different DfT fundings that we've been indicated to be able to do, and TfL are already negotiating for a second tranche of funding for the boroughs, which they will when they've made the announcements of the first tranche, they will then start working with us on the second tranche. So that's the money situation. The responsibility for coordinating the COVID-19 emergency works has lain with Caroline Bruce, Strategic Director of Environment and Leisure, and on behalf of Councillor Livingston, the Cabinet Member for Environment, Transport and the Climate Emergency. And we, as part of that, we launched a commonplace web page for people to communicate directly with us about their concerns about the movement back from lockdown and the increase in traffic and ideas that they may want us to consider. We have then concentrated our resource on managing the flow of information and so that information from all the residents informs the Cabinet Member weekly about what's happening, and as soon as we get the announcement of the funding, then we've already got the first phase of ideas ready to start being funded. And just one other point on that is that there was a certain amount of the devolved highway fund, which has been able to start this process of. So the schemes on Rye Lane and have already started using council highway devolved funding. So in a nutshell, that's where we are. Now, in my report, I also prioritise the area that TfL were prepared to prioritise, and that's cycling routes, lower traffic neighbourhoods, which include things like school streets and town centre areas where we're trying to put social distancing by temporarily increasing footways and maybe doing some emergency road closures, temporary road closures.
Okay. Great. Okay, I think that's a good update. I've had 3 members indicate that they want to ask questions, so I'll take one question at the time, and I'll start with Councillor Leeming because he put his hand up first. So if I hand over to you.
Okay, so I mean, there's a lot to discuss here, and I think we could almost go through things on a sort of line-by-line basis. But I think, and I will probably want to come back and ask subsequent questions. But the first, I think, overarching question is that the funding via TfL. As I understand it, we bid for £1.7 million and have so far had a little more than £100,000. And I'm keen to understand why that might be. That was a week ago last Friday, and so we're keen to know when we might be expecting announcements on any more funding from TfL, and what, on this point, response we've had from TfL about our funding bids so far. Because if £100,000 is all we get when we bid for 1.7 million, then that's not very good. So that's the end of this particular question. I will have more.
Okay, thank you. Can I just check if Councillor Richard Livingston is in the call as well?
I am, Chair.
Great, and please feel free to come in if you want at any point. Just indicate in the chat. Thanks for your question, Richard. It'd be great if you could respond.
Well, TfL didn't respond to me, and I only found out through somebody's tweet about that. So we have sent an email to TfL to ask why third parties have had news of our award before us. So in fact, I only found out today about that 100,000, which of course doesn't reflect our bid at all. I put a formal question into TfL about this, and I'm sure Councillor Livingston will be expecting me to respond to him directly about that in our weekly update with him. I can assure you that the minute we have clarity, I will share with Councillor Livingston, and I'm sure that he will be happy with me to share with your commission that result. They have sent mixed messages. So
can I just comment there? So just sorry. So do you know what the average each borough has been given in London? Are we below average, or
some boroughs got substantially more? I mean, there was hundreds of thousands, multiples of hundreds of thousands going to some boroughs. I mean, I understand there is tranches of funding, but we got, we were in the second decile for funding, I think, not having figures to hand.
So it would be great if we can follow up and find out, what the reason behind that is. And as you say, the problem with the third party. I would like to take the next question to move it on. Can I take Vice Chair Councillor Neil?
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. Thank you, Chair. Briefly, we know that Lambeth and some other councils, I think Haringey was another one, did very well in offering road space for active transport, widening pavements, and doing what they call pop-up paths. I wondered how well we'd done and how well we compared with other London boroughs, maybe inner London boroughs, with that. Richard, I know we had a Twitter conversation or some exchanges on Twitter of that. I wonder but that was some time ago. I wonder how successful we've been with providing extra space for active transport. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. That's a good question. And Richard says he's happy to comment on this as well. If you want to respond, Richard.
Yeah, no. It was partly on the previous question, but I think I can cover both. Hopefully, people will have noticed that today the decision on the next steps on our street space programme has been published on the council's website. So that introduces 19 separate measures around the borough, including better protecting the cycle route that goes up Southwark Bridge Road, introduces 4 school streets, introduces a number of modal filters around the borough as well, and makes some significant improvements in space. So yeah, there clearly are lots of measures that are going forward, and I'm told that there'll be shovels in the ground for this work from next week. So that stuff is going to be implemented very quickly. It's worth noting that is by no means all we're going to be doing. Hopefully people will have seen the Commonplace website for our street space programme and put their ideas and suggestions in about what ought to be done. All of these ideas, we've had about 3,600 comments so far that are being put in, so really good response, and that work is being carried on, so there'll be future stuff coming through. On the point
sorry,
of
Richard, can I just come in there?
Yeah.
So in terms of, do we as a council know where we should be, extending the pavement and, creating cycle lanes? Why we ask, should we be, do we know as a council?
We clearly do, and some of the a lot of the steps that we're taking in the decisions that I just mentioned have been based on work that's been done for quite some time and hasn't just been responding to these points. But we do also
Can I just ask how the decisions were made? So in terms of, are you looking at kind of levels of pollution or deprivation? How are you deciding what to apply for?
Well, and some of the most significant stuff that has been worked on has been stuff that we've been developing through consultation so far. So particularly the Our Healthy Streets Dulwich piece of work and the Walworth Low Emission Network work have low emission neighbourhood work have informed a lot of the decisions that are in that IDM. Clearly, school streets is something we've been working on for some time as well, and those are schools that have identified that they would like a school street as well. So a lot of the stuff that has been in this IDM has been stuff that the council has been looking at and working on, and I think we've been able to bring forward some of this stuff more quickly than we would have done otherwise, but it's been stuff that we've been working on for some time. However, we recognise that given the changing environment, given lockdown, given the challenges that creates in terms of public transport, the need for better air quality, that the work that we've been doing so far won't encapsulate everything that's needed, which is why we think the Commonplace approach is really important to get those ideas coming through so that we can look at those things and to see if there's issues that are emerging because of these changes that we need to address. And one of those particular issues has been issues about pavement widening. We obviously very quickly took steps to address that at Rye Lane and elsewhere, but it's some of those things which might be things that have risen because of COVID that we need to capture through that route.
Great. So can you confirm that in terms of making decisions and what you're applying for, you're doing consultation with the public, you're looking at levels of air pollution, you're looking at deprivation? Are there any other measures you're looking at?
Well, I think those are clearly things that we are looking at, and I think it's so I think those are probably the key ones, Chair.
Okay, great. We've got a few more questions. So I've got a question from Councillor Flynn, and then Jeremy Leach, and then Councillor Burgess had a hand up. So if Councillor Flynn would like to ask his question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My question's around the increase in cycling that I think we've seen and also are expecting as a result of measures as they come forward. What steps is the council putting in place to support new cyclists? And that could be, first of all, people who don't have access to a bike themselves. So, for example, is there opportunities to extend cycle hire schemes into areas such as Camberwell and Peckham? I got all excited when I saw a tweet from TfL the other day saying that they were about to announce some new Southwark docking stations for the Santander bikes. And then they were all on the Rotherhithe end along the cycleway and nothing coming up towards Camberwell Green. You know, hopefully at some point we can put that right. And also alongside that, as people are buying more and more bikes, and I'm one of those who's recently kind of taken up cycling, so I was terrified before, and I've kind of, you know, how do we ensure? So some residents of mine, for example, have come back again and again asking for more cycle storage. And although we've been able to do some of that through Cleaner, Greener, Safer, you know, we simply don't have enough resource there for the kind of on-street, you know, the units that go in the parking spaces. So is there any provision for thinking about how we store more bikes as more people have them, and to encourage this kind of cycling revolution that seems to be taking place to kind of properly take hold and make it as easy as possible for people?
That's a really good question, and is actually one of our draft recommendations in the air quality report. But yeah, if Pip or Richard can answer that question.
Shall I have a go at that first?
Yeah,
sure. Anything that's fine. I mean, Tom is right that we TfL have announced that they're extending Santander docking stations, but on the basis of ones where funding had already been identified. So this is, as you all know, we have a strategy for extending Santander bikes as far south as Peckham and Camberwell. Obviously, longer term, we'd like it to go further, but that's where we've got a plan at the moment. But some of that plan is still unfunded. In fact, most of it is still unfunded. The first element we've been able to move forward is with a combination of British Land's development in Canada Water, where they're paying for some docking stations. And I think I'm probably allowed to say this, but I think a bit of TfL recognising that they've let us down on the Rotherhithe Bridge. They've also agreed to provide to reallocate some underused docking stations from elsewhere in the current network along Jamaica Road to link in with the British Land stuff. That was stuff that was already being planned, but TfL are bringing that forward at a faster rate than was originally envisaged. So Tom is right about that. The next stages need to find money to pay for those docking stations, as well as obviously getting TfL to sign up to the operation of that. So we haven't got that yet. Because that needs the capital money to do that with. I think your point on cycle storage is well made, and that is a conversation that we're currently having internally about we recognise there's a real need to get far more cycle storage, cycle hangers around. How do we get the money to do that and put that out there and achieve that? And finally, one of the things that I've raised with both TfL and Andrew Gilligan, who is Boris's cycling champion and has a role in how some of this money is allocated to local authorities, is that if we're to get new people cycling, some of that has to be around getting people confidence on bikes and training and things, and finding people ways for people actually accessing bikes, because for low-income families, that's not always an easy thing to do. So I made that plea as well with them to see, can they find resources for those things, as well as just doing physical infrastructure measures on our roads. Great.
Thanks, Richard. And I think we have mentioned this in previous meetings, looking at reducing parking spaces and putting bike storages in their place. I think that is the future. And I'm with Tom. I've been cycling around a lot, and I think if we had better facilities, it would be easier for a lot of people. So thanks for your response. Can I, Jeremy, you have a question. Would you like to come in?
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. So my greatest fear is the returning levels of traffic on the Borough and TfL main roads. And what I'd like to understand is how the plans that Southwark are developing look to address that I would suggest over the next 6 to 9 months, because I do think there's a real threat to all the air quality gains and the intimidation gains we've seen. And I think for me, I think things are probably going to be okay inside the congestion charging zone, owing to the increased hours and pricing. My real fear is the rest of the borough and just what other strategies to try and address this on the with TfL and on the borough main roads. Thank you very much.
Shall I respond to that?
Yeah, please do.
I think you'll find that what we agreed to do on the website, it clearly says that we're communicating with TfL to prioritise this. And Jeremy, as you're aware, I have met with you separately after the walking strategy meeting to tell you what we're working with TfL. Their Healthy Streets teams have not come back from furlough yet, but separately to that, I'm in weekly discussions with David McKenna, who is our borough sponsor, and now I have also managed to get one of their signal team back, who's back from furlough. We have my colleague Tim Long, as part of the cabinet paper for the next phase of everything that we're going to do on COVID, has worked with a company called Sistra, who did a desktop study to work out where all the most urgent places for responding are, which include a lot of TfL roads. And we will be, that goes to cabinet, I think, very shortly. Councillor Livingston will confirm that, hopefully, that we will be sending that, and then that gives us permission to talk to TfL in a more, how would I say politely, but a more firmer manner, that we would like them, as they control most of the funding and all the signals, that they respond to our list as soon as possible. And again, it's in all of our interests to make sure that happens, because on our own network, it reduces our efficiency on changing if they're not ready to change the main signals. Just one thing, they did already confirm that they were going to, where they could just make timing amendments, they were going to add time to the pedestrian phases as soon as possible to a series. And the minute we know exactly where those are, we will share that information.
Okay.
That's so. It's everything is, we've got a plan. The plan is being discussed with the cabinet member, and that should be ready within a fortnight, I think, for us to start actioning after we've prioritised this first phase of works.
Okay, thanks. I just had a message from Richard. So he says, our street space approaching, who's looking at what we need to do within 3 months, 6 months and 9 months. You want to come in, don't you, Richard, and respond?
So I think we need to work out which Richard we're asking, because there are two on
sorry, Councillor Livingston.
Sorry, Leanne. Yes, no. Yeah, no. Just very quickly, what I put on there, just so that people know what it says. So I said our street straight approach includes looking not only what we can do immediately, but what needs to be done in 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months. And just on Pip's point, just to say, confirm that a report on our street space approach is going to cabinet in July.
Okay, so in terms of questions, if you do have a question, can you put it in the chat instead of putting your hand up? But I've seen that Councillor Burgess has a question, Councillor Brian, and then Councillor Leeming wants to come back. So Rada, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hi, Richard. So I just really wanted to clarify the point that Leanne made, so that we've done this excellent consultation exercise through Commonplace. We've had a lot of responses, which is obviously incredibly gratifying, I think, and a good piece of work to have done. But I do want to clarify that when we make decisions, we are in fact prioritising the things that Leanne spoke about. So areas of deprivation, areas of poor air quality, and also particularly given the fact that we know that BAME people are disproportionately affected by COVID and by poor air quality, whether that will also be a lens through which we will make decisions and prioritise interventions.
Thanks,
and how
thanks.
that's expressed in the work that's being done.
Thanks for that question.
I mean, that clearly is something that we, those are all factors that we are definitely looking at. The approach that we're taking with Commonplace also obviously identifies to some extent by volume where we know lots of people are saying the same thing needs to happen. That to us is an important indicator about where changes need to happen. But I think
do you think that's true though? Sorry to come in there, because not everyone has access to the internet.
That's a very good point. And I was just about to come on to that point, because I think clearly we also need to see that through the lens about what people's ability is to communicate, and we know that these sorts of things engage some people better than others. So yes, we need to always apply that intelligence to just looking at the numbers that are coming through in Commonplace as well. Although I hope that the fact that we've got so many responses shows that we have got a fairly wide level of engagement. The challenge is going to be doing some of those things. So, for example, in my ward, which I think probably meets a lot of Councillor Burgess's criteria, lots of the comments that we've had, and we have had a lot from my ward, are about what do we do about speeding traffic on the Old Kent Road and things like that, which unfortunately, because it's TfL roads, is outside directly of the council's control. So there are unfortunately some of the problems that we have on some of those roads are things that we don't have the control directly to, but we can have those conversations with TfL about what we need to do.
Great. Would it be possible to share that in terms of when you're making decisions, would it be possible to share the criteria and how you're coming to decisions? I would really appreciate that, so I can kind of understand it. So I want to make sure we're taking everything into consideration, because my fear is that it's the same. I think consultations are really important, but we want to make sure we're engaging with, communities that aren't so forthcoming, that don't know the processes of the council. And I see it as a ward in my ward, people who know how the council works. And we need to make sure that we're hearing from all voices. I think that's really critical when it comes to this issue. So thanks. Would you be able to come back on that and provide the criteria on how you?
Yeah, I can certainly sort of provide more information on the criteria, and obviously we do, as part of feedback, try to get monitoring information back about who's responding as well.
I think that's really key. So I've got a question from Councillor O'Brien, sorry.
You make me sound very exotic. It's actually just O'Brien, but that's
Brian, yeah. I prefer Brian. Can I call you that? Sorry.
You certainly can. Just on the cycle storage thing, I was just going to add to Councillor Fleming, the CGS thing as well takes a long time to deliver by the time it's been applied for as well. So speeding up storage would be good. My question is to Pip. In your initial address, you mentioned about the funding, and I was a bit concerned to hear you mentioned the Devolved Highways Fund. I'm a bit nervous about it because it's one of the small pots of money that councillors are able to allocate in consultation with their residents. And there's been talk about clawbacks because of the funding problems that we're having over COVID. Can you clarify the use of devolved highway funding, please?
I can't because it's not my budget, but I can make sure that I'll get Dale Foden to assure you that it is not the part that is already allocated to your that there is one part of that fund which is for councillors to decide within their areas, and I know that. I'm pretty sure. Oh, Councillor Livingston knows.
Yeah, Councillor Livingston wants to come back in.
Yeah.
Just to make the point that, I mean, for me, I agree entirely, Councillor O'Brien, about the importance of devolved highways money and the democratic process in agreeing that. And any decision to move that money around or to reallocate it or change that budget would have to come through me, and that's certainly not something I'd want to do. So I can give you that reassurance.
I mean, ward councillors may be able to play the game, but I think as long as they're involved in the process.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question, Councillor O'Brien. Right, I'd like Councillor Leeming would like to come back in. He has a follow-up from his question earlier.
Thank you for your answer, Pip. And I was slightly alarmed to find out that you only find out about it by social media. I mean, it's not a criticism of yourself, but it does make me wonder what the nature of or strength of our relationship with TfL actually is, if they are not being proactive about their communication with us. So can you comment on that and what measures we're taking to improve our relationship with TfL so that we are more aligned? Because I understand that, you know, one of the gates that TfL is putting on that money is an understanding of how well we're going to spend it. So if that, you know, is the fact that they're not communicating with us a concern they have that we're not moving fast enough? And then my third point on this question is, what is it that we're not doing that Lambeth are doing, given that they have shovel-ready projects ready to go, when I am with my ward hat on getting significant pushback from residents about the intervention in my ward, and I can't yet go back to my residents and say, well, this is what we're going to do to follow up and this is what we're going to do to follow up. So I think I need, there's actually a few questions there, but I need a much better sense of the ambition that the council has and how that's going to be realised.
Well,
Thanks.
Can I just clarify that what happened is that one person in TfL sent one email to a colleague of mine who was on leave, did not send it to me and did not send it to the Director of Environment. So basically we only found out because that person came back from leave today, but that was not the formal response. It was an informal one.
Did they not have an out of office reply which said, if you don't get me, then talk to somebody else?
Yes, but they didn't. So all I can assure you, and I'm sorry, but I'm not highways, I'm transport policy, as I've said, is that we are taking it extremely seriously. We have a very good record of delivery in our borough and a very good relationship with TfL. I have sent, as I was requested to send an email today when we got that third party information, and I did, and they have responded that they will get back to me tomorrow on that. It's really important that they don't, a lot of the information was leaked to parties and they tweeted it, so we got tweets from all sorts of people with, oh, well done, you've only got 100,000 or something like that, and it bore no relationship to anything on our thing. So I cannot comment any further than that, just that we have taken it very seriously. We've asked for it to be addressed, and they had already promised that we were going to hear properly this week, so we weren't expecting it any faster than that. We do have a good relationship. We've got more cycle schemes delivered than any other borough. We've got all sorts of things where TfL have benefited very well from our relationship. So I totally understand your frustration, and just add that we are a bit frustrated ourselves, but we are doing everything because our whole work programme depends on that funding. So there is nothing more important in my job role at the moment than coordinating that. So I hope you are confident that I will do my job properly, and I do believe that is what Councillor Livingston has asked the whole of the Environment Department to support us on doing. So I will promise that what I will promise is the minute I know, I will share the information with that we can, so that when it goes on the website, you're ready to be able to respond to your own residents accordingly.
Thank you. I've got Sarah Newman who wants to come in. Is that right? Sorry, I can't see you, but I see a hand up.
Here now.
So, can I just remind people, if you want to speak, could you put it in the chat? Because it's hard to see everyone if you've got your hand up. So thanks if you want to come in there.
Sorry, it's just because
no worries at all. It's just so I make sure that I'm including everyone in the conversation. I really don't want to miss anyone. So thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to just let members know that apart from the sort of like the strategic approach to pavement widening and to the green renewal and improving air quality in the borough. We have been doing regulatory services. We've been doing a lot of reactive work in areas of the borough where we know that there's significant pavement stress, where people can't socially distance. And I've been responding to emails because we've had spotters out and lots of staff on the streets for things like business closures and things like that. We've been identifying areas where there is stress. And I know that Dale Foden in Highways is definitely looking at things, for example, you know, pavement widening in certain areas, removing parking bays so that pavements can be widened, and also looking at possible pedestrianisation on some streets. I mean, as you can imagine, certainly in places like around Bermondsey Street, the pavements wouldn't be wide enough on any given day. So, you know, there's a lot that's been done already. We've had highways enforcement out. They've been getting people to get their bins off the pavement, to remove A-boards, to assist movement by foot, and all sorts of things. So there's been a whole reactive stream of work that's been going on, as well as the sort of like the more strategic approach to long-term change that's being looked at by Transport Policy. And I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Right, so I don't think we have any more questions on this. So I think I want to move on to the next item. I just wanted to thank Pip, Sarah and Richard Livingston for answering the questions. It seems like we have ambitious plans, but we need funding. So that kind of moves us neatly onto the next section, which is about carbon offsetting. Put myself on mute. So yeah, the next section's about carbon offsetting. So a report in response to the Commission's request for a briefing on the percentage of schemes utilising carbon offsets to meet targets and how carbon offsets are used. And you should have seen the supplementary paper in the agenda. I hope you've all had a chance to read it. And I'd like to invite you know, Johnson and Simon to come in here and just give us a brief update.
Thank you, Councillor Werner. To provide context behind the paper and to provide context behind our policy, it's really important to stress that our number one priority is always to ensure that we get to a net zero position on site. And we encourage a net zero position in terms of carbon emission on site. It's something that we actively promote within our new Southwark plan, and it's something that we have seen examples of in respect of more recently in schemes across the borough. And also we have increasingly introduced it within our master plan areas as well as our new Southwark plan as well. And of course, the policy backdrop behind all of this is our commitment to being carbon neutral by 2030. And that requires us to be ambitious in respect of new development, which we know contributes a significant amount to carbon emissions in the borough. So I'm going to briefly talk about where we are in respect of carbon offsetting fund. I'm going to highlight a couple of next steps that we'll be taking, and I'm sure Simon will be able to provide any detail that I may have missed on particular areas of focus as well. So in respect of setting the context for how we spend the carbon offsetting, or how we generate, the carbon offset fund, it's important to have a strong and robust base of evidence to be able to say, well, if we are charging £60 per tonne, and I will come back to that in a second, but if we are charging £60 per tonne, can we actually save a tonne of emissions at £60? So is that what it actually costs? And so there's been a lot of work in terms of developing that. There's been work in both the London plan, there's been work in our existing Southwark plan, but also we've reviewed it as part of our work in the new Southwark plan as well. And it's fair to say that this is something that we're consistently reviewing, and right now we're looking to increase that, reflecting on the evidence base that actually to be able to save a tonne, it will cost more than £60, and we need to be able to reflect that both in respect of policy and also the evidence base moving forward. So where does that leave us in terms of the carbon offsetting fund? What we were really keen to do is ensure that we tie it in a strategic way with our commitments to the climate emergency. And so we've wanted to link it into the climate strategy that I believe is going to Cabinet in July, to be able to set the framework and to be able to fund the ambitious commitments that we're going to no doubt have in our climate strategy. But we've also identified it's important to look at opportunities to be able to spend it. And we've wanted to ensure that social justice is at the heart of that. So what we mean by that is that how do we ensure that we're not just bringing down carbon emissions, but we're doing so in such a way which means that we're providing or bringing down the fuel costs or ensuring that we're providing wider benefits to the local community as well. So we've identified one particular initiative that we will be able to bring forward imminently, which is communal lightings in LED lightings in our estates. And what that would seek to do is, firstly, it's good in respect to bringing down emissions, but it's also really important in terms of ensuring that we have well-lit communal areas in our estates. And it will tie in with the work that we're doing in respect of the wider climate strategy and responding to the climate emergency as well. In terms of reflecting on what is next, today we've just uploaded our evidence base for our energy policy, and we're reviewing the energy policy as we speak as one of the first things that we will be updating as part of the new Southwark plan. And part of that will be in line with the climate strategy, promoting sustainable energy, ensuring that we're promoting energy that actually brings down costs for our residents, which is really important and feedback that we're hearing from our communities. And finally, ensuring that any energy policy stands the test of time and is in line with our commitment to be net zero by 2030 as well. As I've said, we're reviewing our carbon offsetting fund in line with our climate strategy, and the expectation is that it will go up, and we will be able to be transparent about that. We will need to have the evidence base to do that, but we're confident that we will be able to do that, and we will have the evidence base to do that, and we'll do that in a transparent manner as well. So that's top headline information. I'm not sure if Simon wanted to come in on any particular points, particularly I know the energy policy, the energy evidence policy that we're developing, and also some of the discussions that go into the carbon offset fund as well.
Great, it would be good to know more about the energy policy. So yeah, thank you.
Yes, Chair. I think there's a couple of points that I wanted to add here. We have been collecting carbon offset funds for some years now. Well, we've been putting them into Section 106 agreements, so the payments have been agreed. The actual payments are coming through now as developments are implemented. And it's true to say that all the major developments that we have coming forward, they are all making, to a greater or lesser extent, a contribution to the offset fund, because the challenges of delivering carbon neutral developments on the scale of developments that we are dealing with in areas like Old Kent Road. We're not talking about small terraces of houses where you can put extra insulation in, photovoltaics on them, etc. There's a lot of homes with a small amount of opportunity to deliver carbon savings. However, we've engaged consultants to really up our game in how we're dealing with the energy statements in planning applications. We're also, as Councillor Situ just said, developing an evidence base that is going to support the development of policy, so that the planning policy can be developed alongside the climate change strategy. One thing that we are establishing, which we think puts us ahead of other boroughs in London, is after declaring the climate emergency and setting ourselves the target of 2030 to be carbon neutral, to actually put in all of the work that actually says, what does that actually mean? What does it entail? Where are we? And what are the planning policies that need to be boosted, strengthened, introduced to get us on the road to the target that we've set? You know, we're taking this extremely seriously. There's a lot of work to be done, and we'll be developing it hand in hand with the as the planning policy area, hand in hand with the climate strategy.
Councillor Werner, if I could just mention as well, we also have Juliet Seymour here as well. If we have any particular questions, who's played a leading role in our planning policy and our energy policy as well.
Great. Shall I open up to questions? Can members indicate if in the chat box if they have a question? So, no questions at all? Okay, I might ask a question. So in terms of going forward, when do you expect to have a detailed plan of where you're going to spend the carbon offsetting funds?
I could comment on certainly the ambition and the target that we're setting ourselves, and certainly Simon and Juliet will probably say it's not possible, but in terms of where the challenge we're setting ourselves is that the paper the report that is going to Cabinet on the climate strategy is going in July, and we would want to develop the action plan for that strategy. You would want the carbon offsetting fund to be able to act as the funding part of that action plan. So essentially, we would want to develop it as that action plan is being developed for that climate strategy that's going to Cabinet in July. But certainly recognising there are things that we can get on with straight away, and that communal lighting, sorry, is something that you can almost implement straight away. But certainly the wider strategy will be developed in coordination with the climate strategy.
Chair, I'm sorry, my chat, I can't get anything on my chat. I'd like to ask.
Oh, no worries. Do you have a question?
Yeah,
Please
thanks. Just with the Old Kent Road Master Plan, obviously, as Simon knows, there's been a lot of applications coming forward. On many of those, it talks about the ability to connect to cell chip in the future. I was just wondering, what's inhibiting these new developments from connecting to cell chip now? What needs to happen?
So I can talk to the Old Kent Road and our plans for connecting up our own housing stock to cell chip goes further than the Old Kent Road as well. So there is a wider plan there. But what is stopping people from connecting up is very much that the schemes haven't come forward. But certainly the intention and the infrastructure is not there at the moment to be able to connect up these different schemes. But certainly the intention is, and the plans that we're putting forward as a council, is that as we connect up more of our housing stock, that will allow for the infrastructure to be developed in terms of piping, to have the developments connect up as well. So certainly the expectation and the ambition is to provide that infrastructure.
Infrastructure. Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Thanks. Jeremy, you've got a question.
Yeah, just a quick question. There's a whole sort of issue of carrot and stick here, I suppose, and I'm just wondering to what degree the industry and developers are coming with you, and whether things are evolving from the building industry and trades, or whether this is all stick, and just how that conversation's developing.
Thank you, Jeremy. That's a really important question, actually, and it's an important one because sometimes we automatically assume that developers, I'm not one to defend them overly, but we automatically assume that they are not at the forefront of trying to do innovative things, and particularly within the commercial development, you are actively seeing really innovative schemes in terms of bringing down carbon emissions, and certainly one was just approved in Tower Bridge, which went above and beyond in respect of a commercial office space and thinking about how is it connecting up, how is it efficient energy use as well. So certainly we're recognizing there is a carrot there as well. And we also recognize in respect to policy that we need to provide the evidence base so that if we do have to implement the stick through the carbon offsetting fund, we're doing so in a transparent way in which the developers can also recognize and understand as well.
Please, can I just add as well, one of the projects that we've got going with Anthesis is with the regeneration department. So where we're building our own council homes, they've asked for a roadmap until 2030, which sets out how we as a developer can actually make all our own homes and all our own developments meet the standards. So that work's going on alongside the planning work. We're doing it together.
Thank you.
Thanks. I just want to come in and because I'd like to know a bit more. So I've been reading up on kind of planning policy, and it said that residential buildings need to be 100% carbon neutral. Is that true? And I think it's 40% for commercial buildings. Could you explain a bit more about that and if we're meeting our target?
Juliet, do you want to come in on that?
So that's for major and strategic applications. At the moment, we're monitoring other boroughs. There's 3 or 4 other boroughs who do look at bringing in reduction of carbon measures for individual households. So we've been researching that. Councillor Seaton and Councillor Livingstone have asked us to do that, to look at whether it would be worth bringing any of those policies in Southwark. And so we need to report back to them on that as part of our work.
Those are individual, they're not big developments.
That's right. So anything that's 10 units or less does not have any requirements, or 1,000 square metres or less does not have any requirements.
Right.
So when we briefed Councillor Seaton and Councillor Livingstone on all of this a little while ago, they asked us to go away and research other boroughs. So that's what we've been doing, because those policies have had very varied impacts and success in those other boroughs. So we need to report back on that to look at whether, when we do the amended policies in the autumn for climate emergency, it's worth bringing in new policies for householders and new requirements. So the policy for net carbon zero is for major applications, which is 10 or more, and strategics. And the 40, and we are implementing that at the moment, and they're paying the £60 a tonne. Now the 40% more rigorous requirement than the building regulations is for the non-residential properties, and that we are not implementing yet, but we do intend to start implementing that soon once the London plan is adopted or our plan is brought forward. And again, that's for more than 1,000 square metres. Yeah.
And is it being implemented already in other boroughs? So
No.
is it good practice or no?
No, we're a real leader on all of this. So most other boroughs are not bringing it in for major developments. So the GLA policy only applies to schemes that are referable to the mayor. So they're the really big ones. They're not, and in Southwark we're bringing it in for all majors and all strategics. So I went to a London meeting a couple of months ago, and we were the only borough who was there who was actually doing that. So I don't know whether any other London boroughs are, but they certainly weren't at that meeting, and virtually all the London boroughs were there. So.
Okay, well that's good to hear, and it sounds like we're going to be increasing how much developers are paying in carbon offsetting, because the £60 per tonne is obviously not enough by the sound of it. That's what I've taken away. And when is that likely to be implemented? So it's going to increase the amount that,
as soon as possible. Julia, I'm not entirely. It would be in line with the climate strategy that's going to cabinet in July, but it's very much as soon as possible, basically.
And do you think, this is a bit of a cheeky question, but do you think, in terms of how much carbon offsetting funds we have, do you think that's enough to fund all the ambitious projects that we want to do in the borough?
I'm never one to say no to more money in terms of the carbon offsetting fund. We we do need to be ambitious. The climate strategy is going to be ambitious, and it does need to be funded, and certainly we need to ensure that all development is also a net neutral contributor in respect of carbon emissions. But we need to do it through evidence base as well. So we will absolutely go far in respect of increasing it and be robust in terms of increasing it, but we'll need to have the evidence base to be able to do so. And being able to point to that evidence base means that if it is challenged, which it may be, we can be able to defend that robustly.
If I could just, I'll just add
Sure.
something to that. The fact is that we've got £1.5 million that we've received so far. We haven't done a detailed projection, but I think over the next sort of 5-6 years, we may get that amount, more than that amount each year coming in as developments come forward. There's an awful lot of payments that will be made for the developments that have been approved in the Old Kent Road but have not been implemented. But some of the research that we have is that retrofitting the enormous amount of housing stock that leaks carbon, quite a lot. The modern new homes are very efficient. We've got, however, 80,000-90,000 homes in the borough that are extremely inefficient. And basically, if we're trying to get to carbon neutral, carbon zero, I think I would have to say that even £10 million is not going to go very far in any retrofitting programme. But that's part of the reason why we want to make sure that it's really properly aligned with the climate change strategy, so that we make the absolute best use of that offset fund. That's one of the reasons why it hasn't been spent yet. It needs to be carefully planned. But as Councillor Situ says, we're going to move to the higher rate and getting the strategy working and putting those projects in very soon.
Great, thank you. I don't think there are any other questions, so I really appreciate you coming along tonight and updating us. And I'd just like to go back to, we are in a climate emergency, so these things need to happen as quickly as possible. Yeah, I just keep going back to that it is an actual emergency and it's a public health crisis that we're facing. So yeah, appreciate all the work you're doing. And if I could just say, should we take a 5-minute break? Well, should we come back at 8:10? Are you happy to do that, members? Yeah. Okay, and if you switch your camera off and put yourself on mute, and if we come back here at 8:10, that would be great.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. Thanks. Hi. Right, thanks. So I think we'll crack on. So unfortunately, the environment officers can't make it to give us an update on shell chip. So we're going to move on to the air quality report to find out what's happened during the last 3 months during lockdown. And I think we've got Sarah Newman who's here to speak about that. You would have seen the report as well in the agenda in the pack.
Chair, I'm going to share my screen so that I can show the presentation on behalf of
Thank you,
Sarah.
Julie.
Sarah, your mic's on mute at the moment. You need to unmute.
Thank you very much. Is that better?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Lovely.
Sorry, I thought you were preparing.
No, I got over ready. I pressed the button too many times. Yeah, cool. I just want to say that I think everybody's noticed how much the environment improved during lockdown. The reduction in traffic, the reduction in noise, and the improvement in air quality is something that everybody's noticed.
In fact, straight after your presentation, we're going to see a 5-minute film someone's done for the commission, so we can we'll hear from residents and what they've seen during lockdown.
Okay.
So, just to get that in.
Right. Yeah. I'm the business unit manager for environmental health and trading standards. So I'm going to ask Paul Newman, who's the team leader of the environmental protection team, to take you through the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Paul Newman, environmental protection team leader, and also Woolworth Low Emission Neighbourhood project manager. I wonder if I could run the slides from my screen. Is that okay, please? Okay, so I'm going to. Can I share my screen from here, please? Sorry, I can't, can I yet? I need to do this. And we are here and present. So can everybody hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. Thank you.
Can you see my screen here with the slides?
We can't see your screen now. We did a minute ago, but it's disappeared.
Okay, let me go back in and see if I can.
Just try sharing it again, I guess.
Yep. So stop sharing and start sharing. So can we see this now?
No.
No? Okay, if somebody else would kindly run the presentation, then I'll just ask for the next slide as we go, if that's okay.
Do it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
All right, I'll have a go.
Thank you.
So this is the going to be two topics on this presentation. The first about the changes that we've noticed to air quality during lockdown, and secondly, we're going to give a short update presentation on the 2019 data, which was presented in the annual status review. So if I could have the next slide, please, Chair. And this, so how has air quality changed during lockdown? Well, there have been some changes that we've noticed. NO2, nitrogen dioxide, that seems to have gone down somewhat. Ozone has increased, and on balance, there's been no significant change in the level of particulates. Have the next slide, please, Chair. And the GLA has done a bit of analysis on the air quality changes and have produced a report. The link to that report is on the slides, which I believe have been circulated if you'd like to have a look at that in more detail. But the takeaways are that the levels of nitrogen dioxide have fallen to about half of what they were before lockdown, and that is in addition to the gains which have been seen from the ultra low emission zone, or ULEZ, which contributed a 44% reduction at roadside NO2. Now that was before the lockdown commenced. Can we have the next slide, please, Chair? There's also a second report I referred to, which is an air quality consultants report, which has looked at the changes across England and Wales. And you'll see from that there's been between a 1/5 and 2/5 reduction in nitrogen dioxide and other oxides of nitrogen. But there's also been approximately a 17% increase in roadside ozone. And this is largely due to the reduction in the roadside nitrogen dioxide. Again, there's a link there in the slides if anyone would like to look at that report in further detail later. Can I have the next slide, please, Chair? So looking at those parameters in a little bit more detail, where does nitrogen dioxide come from? Well, it comes from combustion of fossil fuels, so road fuel and natural gas. And the sources of those are obviously road traffic. There's a graph on the next slide which shows how that's changed how road traffic has changed during lockdown. And also, obviously, the heating sources, there's less commercial heating because there's fewer offices open during lockdown. And there's been lovely weather from March through to May, and there's been less domestic heating than you'd normally expect. May I have the next slide, please, Chair? This is the graph referred to the reduction in road traffic. So this shows the percentage change compared to the same period in 2019. And there's different coloured lines showing the different types of roads. So there's the TLRN roads and the inner and outer road, in and out of London, and also central London. But you can see there's been a significant dip from the end of March to the end of April. May I have the next slide, please, Chair? I've done a couple of graphs here, and the pink area is the at the right of each graph is the area of interest. This is where it shows the change during lockdown. So you can see the trend in urban areas was already downwards as we exit the winter, but you can see there's a distinct dip in the levels of nitrogen dioxide in urban areas. Less noticeable in rural areas. There's obviously been something happening there, but it's not so apparent that there's been an improvement due to lockdown. For the next slide, please. This also shows industrial and roadside. So the roadside graph on the left of the screen is the one that shows the deepest dip during the lockdown period. But you can also see there's been a little bit of a decline in NO2 due to reductions in industrial activity. And that might also be HGV movements linked to industrial activity. So moving on, next slide, please, Chair, to ozone. Where does that come from? Well, it's oxygen, which is catalyzed by other things like hydrocarbons in the presence of sunlight. So it requires sunlight and usually vehicle exhaust products, but there are also other sources such as fugitive emissions from petrol stations and dry cleaning fluids from dry cleaning operations. That's been affected also by the weather. There's been more sunshine than usual, as mentioned earlier, from March through to May. And furthermore, with the weather, there were some cross-boundary air movements which imported more ozone into London than you'd normally expect. Another thing which is allowing ozone to rise is that when you have higher levels of NO2, you get lower levels of ozone because the NO2 scavenges the ozone and reduces it. So there's a little bit of a trade-off between gains in NO2 and the opposite with ozone, where we've actually seen an increase. Please may I have the next slide. So here's the full graph showing how ozone has risen, and you'll see that roadside, the bottom left graph there, is where you get the sharpest increase during lockdown. Please have the next slide. Moving on to particulate matter, there hasn't been much change in particulate matter, not a significant change, but that doesn't necessarily mean there hasn't been any benefit, because the most harmful types of particulate matter come from diesel vehicle exhaust. So as we saw from the last environment scrutiny meeting, there was a presentation which showed that there's a clear signature health effect on hydrocarbon particulates from diesel vehicles. The reduction in vehicle movements was balanced by the weather, bringing more particulate pollution in from outside London, and there was some additional local pollution from increases of bonfires, people taking advantage of the good weather and the fact they were at home to clear up the rear garden, and ended up burning quite a lot of that green waste rather than sending it for collection. Please have the next slide. So to sum up the air quality changes, there are some uncertainties in the data, so we can't say yet with any certainty it's caused this, but we can see the trends. Obviously, the London Mayor's transport strategy, they waived the ULEZ charges during lockdown, so there may have been more vehicles coming in, more dirty vehicles coming in than you'd normally expect when the charges are in place, balanced perhaps by the introduction of some low emission vehicles just before the lockdown. And as I've mentioned, the weather conditions, the stable high pressure and the import of air masses from outside of London also contribute to the uncertainties. And the data won't be fully ratified until the end of the year. So data is ratified based on calendar years, and we've just done the 2019 data. The 2020 data will be available sort of in the early 2021. Please may I have the next slide. So to sum up, I think the COVID-19 outbreak has highlighted that there has been noticeable improvements when the emissions have changed. It's highlighted for me the importance of transboundary pollution. So as air quality, as local emissions reduce, the impact of transboundary imports increases. We've also seen that a reduction in oxides of nitrogen has consequences for the levels of ozone, which increase proportionately. There will be further analysis needed to fully understand all the impacts, and as I've said, the data will be validated and ratified by the end of the year, or at the end of the year. I think it's also highlighted the scale of the challenge to improve air quality in the future. Chair, that brings me to the end of this part of the presentation. I'm now going to move on to talk about the annual status review, which is only a few slides long, so perhaps we could wait until the end of both parts of the presentation before we take questions on
thank you.
Part. Thank you. So if we could have the next slide, please. So this is the annual status report 2019. Now the next slide, please. What it provides is a record of the air quality that as we monitor it in Southwark for each calendar year. It also includes our progress on the Air Quality Action Plan, which is a list of 130 or so action points that we're undertaking to try and help improve air quality. We submit this report every year to the Greater London Authority and also the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. The ASR for 2019 was submitted on the 29th of May, and it's been published on our website. It's a big document, so I couldn't circulate it, but there is the link here in the slides, which opens the document from our website. Please may I have the next slide. This graph shows the approximate trends in air quality. It's for nitrogen dioxide, but the trends for particulate matter are very similar, and it shows a gradual long-term improvement in air quality as the car engines improve, as fuel efficiency improves, and there's sort of industrial developments have larger scale things like combined heat and power rather than individual heating elements for each unit. Please may I have the next slide. And this is what the Air Quality Action Plan contains. So it shows how we manage local air quality. So in addition to just monitoring with air quality monitoring stations, we also have a system of permitting petrol stations and dry cleaning facilities, which, as I mentioned earlier, may contribute to emissions which promote ozone. It looks at how emissions from buildings are improved. We work on increasing public awareness and reducing emissions from road traffic. So, for example, the Woolworth low emission neighbourhood is looking at how we can cut rat running through residential areas to decrease in exposure to people living there. It's got points on how to reduce carbon emissions, and we expect that will feed into the overarching carbon strategy. Also various parts of the regulation which we do, so we administer the Clean Air Act in Southwark, and it sets out the ways we support the GLA. So in addition to the Woolworth LEM, which is Mayor's Air Quality Fund funded, we're also involved in a couple of other Mayor's Air Quality Fund projects, and we support the public health framework objectives. So I think that is the last slide in the presentation. Yes, it is. So I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any for me.
Thanks very much. So I'll open it up to questions. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Burgess.
Hi, I apologise for everyone for not having my video on. My iPad is slowly running out of charge, despite currently being on a charger. I've got 4% left, so sorry about that. Thank you very much for the. Yeah, I know. Thanks. I know I'm slightly waffling, you know, if I think about my battery. Thank you very much for the presentation. That was all quite hopeful. The big kind of piece that seemed to be missing for me is, I suppose, a strategy on cars, and, you know, does all the thinking kind of accept the current level of cars that are on the road, and the hope is that, you know, the switch is to electric or hybrid vehicles, but do we actually have a strategy in terms of tackling the dominance of the car in Southwark?
So I think Sarah.
No, it's all right, Paul. You say your bit, and if you miss anything, I'll say something.
Okay, so I think the strategy there is led by transport policy rather than led by environmental protection team. Certainly we support that, and as we do our air quality projects, of course, we're looking for initiatives which support walking, cycling and active travel over car use. We also, you know, so far as the council is aiming to support electric vehicles, one of the things in the air quality action plan is looking at variable charges for parking for diesels as compared to, you know, for example, electric vehicles. Over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the thing is with something like air quality, it touches lots of different areas. We did feed into the movement plan and to all its various iterations. We feed into the new plan for Southwark in terms of planning policy. I mean, the air quality unit in environmental protection did a piece of work and realised that there were 50 different strategies that the local authority have that air quality could make sure that those strategies engage with us on improving air quality. And as they come up for renewal, we're trying to link in to all of those different strategies, be it on parks and green spaces or whatever. So, but the thing is that, I mean, people have already written strategies. They come up for renewal at certain times. And I think the thing is, it's a piece by piece, step by step, getting those links in. And it's marvellous that we've made the commitment to the climate emergency, because that will push the environment from being a sort of also ran in terms of the economic and other considerations to something that's much further up the table. So we expect to get much further, much faster over the next 5 to 10 years.
Can I just have a follow up there? In terms of your next interaction, as it were, with the sort of highways and transport policy, when will that be? You say things come up for renewal. So when is that due for renewal, and when are you likely to have those conversations?
Well, the movement plan came through about 18 months ago, and so I'm not quite sure. I think it's a 5-year plan. So we'll be looking at that again in another 5 years. But we work very closely with highways. When the offices are open, we sit right next to them. I mean, when the lockdown came down, they actually came to us and said, what sort of ideas have you got that we can start moving with on the ground? And we gave them a lot of ideas that we developed for the Old Kent Road and the greening thereof. And because it's an air quality focus area, and as part of the air quality action plan, we've got to take at least one major action in all of our 7 air quality focus areas. And so we already were dreaming up ideas that we have fed into highways for them to make a decision on when they're doing their prioritisation. So it's a constant flux. We don't just engage at that point.
Thanks. Pip, did you want to come in?
I just thought I would support what Sarah and Paul said. Is our planning policy is about car-free development. We make every new resident permit-free. We do a lot to discourage car ownership. But if you also look at the quantity of permits on the report I sent you from CPZ, it's actually quite low in most areas, which demonstrates that car ownership is reducing generally. The north of the borough, obviously a lot. There are areas which are under 30% car ownership now. There are the higher levels are where you'd expect, where public transport is not so prevalent, like down in the south of the borough. So we are very strong on that now, and we also make sure that any area that hasn't got a CPZ, if there's a development there, we make them permit free for future CPZs as well. And the idea is that you discourage car ownership from day one. And just to add, the extra thing that we added in just recently is that all the new properties must be marketed. We ask a condition that they must be marketed as car free as well. Because we got a lot of people saying, oh, can you change planning because we actually would like to have a car. So we do deal with that. But now we put the marketing clause in as well, condition, so that it's absolutely clear from day one, whether you're a private or social or intermediate new resident into that area, you are very aware from day one that it will be car free.
Thanks. I've got a question from Jeremy.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Paul, thanks for all you're doing around the Walworth low emissions neighbourhood. That's really encouraging. So just a quick question is, how is Southwark maximising the opportunity to enable sustainable freight across the borough?
So, I mean, I can only talk about what we've done in the Walworth Road lane. I mean, that's the best example so far, is we're working with providers of cargo bikes and trying to encourage them into the area and consulting with businesses as to how much freight they feel they could move by cargo bike. And we have some interest from one company which is looking at one of the arches in Walworth Road. And then in addition, the highways team have got people working with people like Pedal Me with initiatives that they've got coming up. So there's also, as you know, the amount of cargo bike freight and low emission freight is increasing. I believe there was something like a 600% increase last year, according to Team London Bridge, in cargo bike usage from their survey. So wherever we can encourage that and support that, we will.
And just, is it all right for a quick follow-up, Leanne?
Yeah, sure.
And I suppose, if just for Councillor Situ, really, are there ways that Southwark in its regeneration is enabling this in the projects that it's working on and in charge of?
Sorry, is that for Councillor Situ, not myself, yes?
It was, but maybe it's best.
He's not.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think he's left the meeting. We didn't ask him to stay, so maybe we can follow up with him.
I can quickly say that we are talking with Network. We talked with Network Rail only last week about the arches between Lewisham and ourselves. They are much more proactive on looking at doing utilising them for small business startups, which would be about redistribution using cargo bikes. And also, I have just been approached by someone for the Old Kent Road specifically about somebody who wants to pioneer some cargo bike e-charging points in the areas. So we're talking with them and Network Rail, and we totally agree with Paul and Sarah that these are really important. Team London Bridge pioneered it a bit in our borough, but also just to let you know that guys in St Thomas's did move blood products using cargo bikes and found that that was much more efficient between the 3 main hospitals in our borough, St Thomas's, Kings and that, by using bikes with refrigeration units. So I think if a hospital trusts it to move it, that's really the best endorsement we can have for encouraging it.
Thank you both.
Thanks. So next I've got Councillor Leeming, followed by Councillor Neal. So Councillor Leeming.
Everything just disappeared. Then my computer said that was a glitch, and the glitch seems to be resolved. So, I mean,
is that your question?
No, I've been slightly thrown aside by the fact that when I started to speak, my screen went dead. So, I echo Jeremy's points about cargo bikes, and sort of wanted to make one very small point. I heard earlier from Simon. He said started talking about electric cars, and I want us to be very clear that electric cars are not the solution. They are a small. Thank you. Good to see Pip nodding at this.
We agree. We agree.
The bigger question is, how much are we painting this as a sort of placemaking initiative, sort of trying to create the vision? You know, I'm struck by the Mayor Hidalgo in Paris's idea of the 15-minute city, and how much are we seeing this not as a sort of punitive thing that we must stop people doing this nasty car driving thing, but actually painting this vision of a sort of green borough where everything is nearby, and we live in a sort of garden town oasis kind of thing. So how can we reframe it like that?
I think that's a really good question, and that's, again, we cover that in our scrutiny report, air quality scrutiny report, and I think Paris have done a really good job. And you just have to look at COVID-19 and how communities are working together, how more people are working from home. We have been creating the future, the city of the future during lockdown. So I would like to reiterate what Richard said, and yeah, it'd be good to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Could I just add that only today we received some information from Global Action Plan. They've been out in Southwark and Lambeth asking questions about what people want to keep and leave from the lockdown. And obviously they want to keep the environmental improvements, and more people want to stay working from home. We only got those stats this afternoon, but we can certainly provide the committee with a copy of their presentation.
Wonderful. Could you do that this week, if possible?
I'll do it straight after the meeting.
Thank you.
Who do you want me to send it to?
If you send it to Julie.
Julie. Lovely. Yeah. Will do.
Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? So yeah, it seems like people are. Yeah, I think what Richard is saying is that we need an overall vision, and we're doing it for the benefit of everyone. It's not about losing something, but it's gaining a healthier borough, more community orientated borough. I've got a question from Councillor Neal.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne. Thank you, Chair. Really appreciate the report. It seems like ages since I asked for it. It's very helpful. If we're going to overcome the timidity of local councillors, I think we're quite a conservative bunch, and there is a small 14% in the borough in C2 area, 14% of households who have on-street parking permits. A small but vociferous lobby, but it certainly helps me to understand what a small proportion of households in my ward have on-street parking. But I remember, I'm sure I asked for this by ward. I wondered if you'd be able to deliver it by ward. And I'm sure the other councillors on this committee will understand how important this is for us to be emboldened to produce sustainable streets. I also wondered, maybe your partners in the housing department could produce a similar document. Is it possible to have a similar document with the number of car parking spaces on housing estates? Because without without both of these, we can't get a bigger picture of the number of parking spaces in our wards. I mean, we're all very concerned about the bigger Southwark picture, but really, I think it's fair to say that as councillors, we operate on a ward boundary basis. So thank you for this. What does LLPG stand for? Can you get this by ward? And would you be able to give us the data on the estates as well? Thank you.
Thank you.
Local Land and Property Gazetteer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. I
know some dumb stuff.
I will take that back, Councillor Neil, and we were intending on doing that because of the working from home. It's been really hard to coordinate the housing stuff with the CPZ stuff. But we will aim to. It is important for us because I'm doing some work with the Tustin estate at the moment. So we want to be fair. So I will attempt to get all that data to you, and I will ask my colleagues who keep that data to do a ward split. I'm sure that would be possible.
That'd be lovely. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I don't think I have any more questions, but we'll be including this in our final.
Yes, you do. Can I have one more, Leanne?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Sorry, I would chat, but I've got an error message saying I'm not part of the chat group, so I'm not allowed to leave a message.
I didn't kick you out. Sorry.
Oh, I don't know. Someone doesn't like me. Just something picking up very quickly on what Sarah said about the fact that so many different elements within the council have an impact on air quality and climate and all that sort of thing. I was just wondering, in Southwark, we've got a climate change director now, and would that be the central place that brings in all of those different elements? So we've got a central point where all of that stuff can be collated. Is that supposed to work?
Yes, certainly we're hoping so. I mean, we see us, I mean, we were, before the council declared a climate emergency, we were looking at how we might get some overall governance of the air quality improvement agenda, because it cuts across all the services in the authority. And whilst the environmental protection team and myself work very hard, you know, penetrating into some service areas has been not as easy to get them on board with the agenda. Some have been very good. We've worked very well with procurement and with highways in particular. But you know,
sorry to interrupt you. I've just been told that Chris Page is in the meeting, so we could bring him in.
Well, after
my magic
certainly
here
add
he
something.
appears.
But
I'm sitting quietly in the corner, hoping no one notices me.
You should have introduced yourself. Don't be shy.
Yeah, no, but what we're doing at the moment is we're waiting for the governance arrangements around the climate emergency to be worked out, and we will be part of those streams of reporting, I'm quite sure.
No, that's
Chris,
great. I think us as a Scrutiny Commission, that's something that we can keep oversight on as well.
Lovely. Do you want to add anything, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, Sarah's absolutely right. I mean, at the moment, we're putting together the strategy, and part of that will be how some of this stuff is governed across the organisation. I think it would be slightly outside of my remit to have control over every aspect of the council's work that has any impact on climate, because I think, as everyone in this committee will know, you know, everything that we do has an impact. But what I am going to try and do is try to map some of these things together so that every bit of the council is reporting on what they're doing, and that there's a kind of join up across what's happening in different bits of the council, so that we don't have you know, numerous strategies all trying to do the same sort of thing, but actually have it all pulled together. So I mean, it's all been worked through at the moment, but yeah, the intention is, in appointing someone to my role, was to have somebody who had kind of oversight over all the things that had impact on climate change within the council.
I think Jeremy just has a quick point, and then I'm going to bring Councillor Burgess in.
Oh, sorry, Leanne, my thing is really dying. I'm on 2%.
Go ahead.
If I go first. Sorry. Thank you. I was really impressed with the CPZ information in the pack, and I think that's really valuable, and it allows us to see to understand car ownership a lot better. And it's completely clear that basically the kind of mid to south of the borough is certainly generating traffic through local residents' car ownership and use. And what I wanted to know is, can the council harness data like ANPR data to really understand in some detail traffic flows and traffic generation, and then come up with an active plan to tackle that? I understand, Pip, that we're doing our great stuff with regen and we're not having new developments with cars, but it seems to me that actually we're not doing enough on the sort of residential car use, and we could have a very active strategy on that, but it's kind of missing. And I appreciate we haven't got highways officers here, and that would have been good to have.
I can quickly tell you,
ANPR data is the question.
Yes, we have now got traffic sensors up all over the borough, and TfL have got them in the CAS area around the Elephant and Castle and everything. These are leading towards us being able to have real-time information. That one of my colleagues, Davina Fell, is leading on our digital futures, and I've contributed to that, as many of my colleagues here have, to actually make sure we're future-proofing all of the technology that we're using to be able to be much more efficient, with the aim of having real-time visual information so that we can work with the emergency services, deal with accidents much quicker, response time, and then make much more effective reactive systems. Now, in that, you then manage to see how many people are walking, cycling in those videos, and that will be, when you start looking at that, that's one side of it. So the way we're doing that. The second side is that we should be trying to encourage people to give up their cars and use car clubs as an intermediary. And the car clubs that provide e-cars, obviously we don't want loads of traffic, but if you, as a starting intermediary between car ownership and car clubs, there are a lot of car clubs spaces available in the borough now, and it's one of, I do believe it's a very good method of weaning people off owning their own car. So those are two things that are well embedded in our existing policy.
And Pip, do we have access to ANPR data?
We get reports from that. The idea of this digital futures is that it can become, we can link into that in a more efficient way. So yes, we do get access to it, but we can't necessarily link it very quickly to our own GIS mapping, where we keep most of the access to that data. But it's absolutely at the forefront to make sure that we've got the best information, because it makes more efficient decisions and saves lives. That's really our duty of care on the highway, means that we really want to do that.
Thanks. Jeremy, did you want to come in?
No, I just popped some information on the thing which just might be useful to people. I thought it's not quite what Graham said, but it's jaw-dropping data, and it's a wonderful website.
Thank you. No, appreciate it. We'll take note of that. So thanks for that. Do I have any other questions? Final questions, comments? No? Great. Thank you very much, Sarah, Paul, Pip, for coming to talk to us about that. We're going to show a short video next. So during the lockdown, I asked for people to take photographs and send in videos of their lockdown experience to show that kind of the environment's improved. And Helena Smith, a local filmmaker and photographer, came forward, and she produced a 25-minute video interviewing a cross-section of people in the borough and talking to them about their experiences of lockdown. She's managed to create a 5-minute one, which we're going to show now, so you can get a bit of a flavour. But I think it's a really well made video, and I put it on Twitter, and I'm going to be talking to BBC Radio on Monday about it as well. Yeah, I think it's good to kind of get the message out. So I think Julie's going to show it, aren't you? You're going to.
Which BBC radio, Leanne?
BBC Radio London, sorry.
That's where I worked 25 years ago.
Did you? Oh, great.
Okay, I think it's lined up.
Short video. This is the shortened version. Oh, you're already, yeah, okay. You need to make it bigger, I think.
Is it not showing that well?
No, and we can't hear it.
We need to go full screen, I think. Oh, yeah.
Ooh, Any tips? Sorry, I'm a bit technically challenged here.
Yeah, some showing video on, well, certainly on Zoom. I don't know so much about Teams, but showing video this way is quite jumpy sometimes. I wonder whether you just send us the link and we'll watch it and come back in 5 minutes.
Okay, shall we do that? Chair, is that a good solution?
Yeah, I think so. Let me put in the link. So this is the 5-minute one. Yeah, let me put the link in, and if you come back in, yeah, once you've watched it, there you go. So if we come back at yeah, in 5 minutes, 4 minutes too. And if you switch your camera off and put yourself on mute.
Hi, my name is Joe Holt.
Your camera is still on, Councillor O'Brien.
That was very nice.
Yeah, I think it's a really lovely film, really, and it kind of, I think you said that it captures the pace of lockdown as well, and it's nice to hear from some different people in Southwark and their experience of lockdown and how they're feeling.
Yeah, I mean, there was something about the pace of it, the sort of slightly slow and gentle pace of it, which it sort of mirrored the whole lockdown.
Yeah, I know. I think Helen has done a really nice job of capturing it. And my idea was to have people talking about Southwark in the future. So what would Southwark look like in 2030? But I think, speaking with Julie, we thought that we could capture that now because of all the changes that have happened. The improved air quality, being able to hear the birds, more people cycling. So it was a good opportunity to capture that.
Is my camera off, by the way? Because
it's off, yeah.
Yeah, it's crashed. Don't know why.
So I think the last thing we're going to go through is the scrutiny review. So the climate emergency roadmap draft. Have you all had a chance to look at that? Because what we'd like to do is to get it signed off and know if anyone has any comments or any additions they'd like to add to it. So if you would, could you indicate in the chat box? Has everyone read it? Yeah.
I have to say I haven't, I'm afraid. I intended to, but then I ended up working all day, so sorry.
Okay, because I think the idea is to get it signed off in this meeting. Julie, what is the procedure on this?
Yeah, so I think generally speaking, the draft report goes to a meeting, and then that's an opportunity if anybody would have any comments, would like to make any tweaks, would like to make any additional amendments. This is the moment, and then if we record them, or then we can make some additions to the final report, or if everybody's happy with the report, you could just formally accept it now. So those are the options, really.
Thank you. So are people happy to accept it?
Sorry, is that the document that was at the end of the pack?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Oh, okay, that's a shame because I think it needs work. What I really liked that I've seen is the slideshow that I think Radha put round a few weeks ago. I've distributed that to colleagues as well, and they absolutely love it. It's really good, meaty stuff, and it's real life. It's full of deliverables. I mean, there's a few notes on it saying it's not the finished product yet, but I think that's got a huge amount of potential. I did have a skim read of the document this afternoon, and I must admit I found a lot of intangibles in it that I don't feel are measurable, and that worries me slightly.
Okay, could you be more specific?
I can if I can bring the document up.
And just, I don't know what the slideshow is. I don't think I've seen it.
Have you not? Is Radha online?
I don't think she is.
Radha? No.
Chair, I'm just wondering if that is the slideshow that's being referred to is for the air quality report.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so yeah, that just to let you know. So I did send an email out today. We're still working on the air quality, and we're going to add the additions from today on and circulate it on Monday at 4 o'clock. And then we're hoping to have a meeting on the 1st of July to sign that off, an hour's meeting. So I was going to get onto that lastly. So there's another report coming out. This one is in response to the climate emergency. We're doing a more specific one on air quality, which will be sent on Monday.
Well, that slideshow was one that Jeremy and I fed into as well. So I think Jeremy first, me second, Radha third. So I think we had quite a lot of input into it.
Yeah, so that is all in the air quality report.
Okay, well, it's a good piece.
There are 2 reports.
Okay. Let me try and find this thing.
Right.
So this report was some further reflections on the climate emergency, to pick up on the items that we've had, particularly around planning and regeneration, and yeah, to make some further comments to that. That was the intention of this report.
So maybe what we can do, people haven't read it, some people haven't read it, what we could do is we could sign them both off on the meeting on the 1st of July. What do you think? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think we need to defer it, to be honest. I think it needs a bit of work.
Okay, well, it'd be good if you could send details. Is that okay to do that? If we got enough time, Judy?
Yeah, so I think, so what would be helpful is if people could send any further comments, ideally in the next couple of days.
You know what I'm worried about is that people are going to comment on air quality as well. So I think it's good that people see both reports at the same time.
This is agenda item 10, is it? That
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could certainly recirculate it again for the 1st of July.
Yeah, I mean, if Jeremy, you have a question.
No, it was a point really, just in relation to agenda item 10, and I don't want to be too unctuous to Richard or Chris, but there was a stakeholder engagement meeting on Tuesday. Sorry, there was a partnership stakeholder meeting on Tuesday, and the whole issue of engagement was picked up. And I think that, you know, although the council has really struggled because of COVID to do the engagement it envisaged, I think that people were pretty much of the opinion that the use of this organisation Traverse and the engagement Southwark we're planning to do now, given the constraints of social distancing, was pretty robust, and people were really impressed with the attention to the youth to engaging with younger people. So
Good.
just saying,
so that was
engagement stuff
included.
was strong.
So we're going to be doing that. Sorry, I wasn't in that meeting on yesterday. So we are going to be engaging with young people.
Do you want me to come in to that, Chair?
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, no, so yes, the meeting Jeremy was referring to, we've got a partnership steering group, which is all of the sort of groups and things in the borough that are interested. Traverse are a company that we've employed to do our engagement work. We've had to shift how we do the engagement because we can't do it obviously in the way we wanted ahead of the July report because of COVID. But our plan is to do ongoing engagement from July onwards, which is doing a kind of breadth of engagement across the borough, as well as targeted engagement on underrepresented groups. So particularly looking at some BAME communities in the borough. And in addition, something that's come out very clearly from this committee, but also from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and the Partnership Steering Group, is the need to do something better on youth engagement. And what we're intending to do is to set up a similar body to the Partnership Steering Group for young people, so that it's young and for them to shape what engagement looks like. So rather than all of us, not to suggest anyone here isn't youth anymore, but rather than all of us to frame how to engage with young people, to actually get a group of kind of engaged young people on this issue to try and shape what that looks like across the borough.
Okay, thanks. So I think what we're going to do is, can everyone make a meeting for an hour on the 1st of July?
Stand by.
Yeah, I can make that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So what we'll do, we'll schedule a meeting for the 1st of July. You'll have, so you can go back and read this report that is attached to the pack, and we will be sending out the air quality report at 4 o'clock on Monday. Please send in your comments and feedback, and then on the 1st of July, we will hopefully get it signed off during that meeting so we can go to Cabinet. Is that okay? Are you all in agreement?
Yeah, I think I was just a bit confused. I have picked it up now, and there's
because we're doing multiple reports. We've done a lot of work into this, and we've already submitted a report. So this is our second and third report. So there's one on the overall strategy, and then there's one specifically on air quality. So the one in the pack is on the climate change emergency, and then we'll be sending out the air quality one on Monday for you to review. So if you could please feedback and add your comments, and then we can update it, and then we can hopefully sign it off on the 1st of July.
Okay.
Great. Okay. I think that's it, actually. I think, yeah, I'd like to thank everyone. And before I close, do you have any comments, questions about the process? Great. Well, thanks very much for your contributions. I think it was a really useful meeting, and I learnt a lot. And yeah, I think everyone was quite responsive, and I hope we're all on the same page. So yeah, thank you. Have a good evening, and we will send out the report and also an invitation to the next meeting, which will be on the 1st of July between 7 and 8 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Thanks, Leanne. Thank you. Good night.